I'm here to present my presentation, which is entitled The Rape Over of Hip Hop Corporate Overseers Wrecking the Black Community. And what I'll start with is just a basic etymology of hip hop, which is the basis of the definition of hip hop. I just need the audio. And basically, hip means to know. It's a form of intelligence. To be hip is to be update and relevant. Hop is a form of movement. You can't just observe a hop. You gotta hop up into it. Hip and hop is more than music because hip is the knowledge and hop is the movement. Basically, hip hop is about putting knowledge into actions. And then you have something called the culture of hip hop. And the culture of hip hop is represented through various elements. Through graffiti art, artists began to paint their stories on the subways of New York and buildings, basically to say who they are and to represent themselves. Breakers began to break away from the average ordinary life in the inner city. And also DJs began to, interact artistically with the music by something called cutting, scratching, and mixing. And then this also served as the beat for the breakdancers. They would dance to some of the scratches that the DJs would do. And also the MC, it stood for mass controller, who directed the moves. He directed and moved the crowd rhythmically, rhyming, and spoken word. So that's basically the ways in which the hip hop culture was represented early on. So I have some pictures of how some of that looks. You have basically Cool Art, one of the first DJs. You have MC Light, represented for the females. You have one of the first breakdance crews called Rocksteady Crew, and then you have one of the first graffiti art crews, the Fabulous Five. So this was basically rooted in just positive fun and trying to uplift community. And some of the different ages of hip hop are the light age, and this was it's called the light age, and the first one was between the 70s and 80s, and this was the time where kind of like hip hop was just in the streets and the club and just at parks and random block parties, and it wasn't really acknowledged by the city as a whole. And people were trying to fight back against it anyway. When the media started finding out what hip hop was, they actually tried to fight back against it. That was into the golden age, 80s and 90s, where corporate America began to take an interest in hip hop, and it's called the golden age because the golden album is where an artist sells like 500,000, units or more. So artists began to reach this random goal of selling 500,000 albums, and that was really big because they were just in the streets, just rhyming and rapping, just doing what they do, and all of a sudden they start actually selling to the mass community. And basically the age between the 90s and the 2000s is known as the platinum age, and I don't know if you all know, a platinum album is when an artist sells 1 million copies or more. And basically this is when ratings, chart positions, and fame, money became a new exploration of hip-hop artists. They're like, okay, the public like us, so the face of hip-hop start to change during this period, and I'm going to elaborate on that more a little bit later. And then you have what is known as the informational age, which is now the 2000s up until this period on. And basically, at this point, hip-hop is international culture. Everybody wants to be, a lot of young kids want to aspire to be a rapper. Who doesn't want to be a rapper? They're like, cool. So, okay. So, where my research falls in all this. I'm studying the platinum age of hip-hop, the 90s through the 2000s, and this is where I note that there's a shift in the face of hip-hop and the culture and some of the objectives. And where my biases come in, basically, there's regional hip-hop everywhere, but the hip-hop I'm focusing on is the hip-hop that emerged during the 70s and 80s in New York, specifically the way in which they define hip-hop, because that's where hip-hop started, and then it was grasped on by different regions and then expounded upon, which was still hip-hop. But I just want to let you guys know, keep that in mind when I'm presenting all these definitions of hip-hop. So, during this time, the 90s and the 90s through the 2000s, corporate world meets hip-hop. This is where you have the 4 major distribution companies: Universal, EMI, Warner Music Group, and Sony Music Group. And basically, these are the corporations that basically controlled all of how hip-hop was disseminated, which hip-hop was going to play, which hip-hop sold. And this is when Nas stated that Everybody sound the same, commercialized the game, reminiscing when it wasn't about business. It forgot where it started, so we all gather here for our dearly departed. This is when the message of hip hop started to change because it started, to be about get rich or die trying. Corporate world had took over hip hop, so you know what? They start saying that, okay, where's the real hip hop at? I'm seeing this change. What is this crap? This is not hip hop. Some of the stuff that was being played on the radio. So you hear some of the early MCs and early DJs and breakdancers, all that saying, this stuff that they're considering hip hop that's on the radio is not real hip hop. And also, this is at a time period where wealth meets hip hop, and I want you guys to see it from the artist's eyes, how the artists felt when they start to, experience this new sense of wealth just for doing what they love to do.
Man, I couldn't picture this. 50-inch screen, money green leather sofa. Got 2 rides, a limousine with the chauffeur. Phone bill about 2 G's flat. No need to worry, my accountant handles that. And my whole crew is lounging, celebrating every day, no more public housing. Thinking back on my one-room shack. Now my mom lives an act with me on the back. And she loves to show me off, of course. Smiles every time my face is up in the store. We used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat, wonder why Christmas missed us. Birthdays was the worst days. Now we sip champagne when we thirsty. Damn right I like the life I live. Cause I went from negative to positive and it's all. And if you don't,
now you know. So basically,